Hello everyone and welcome back to the final chicane with me, cristinanneboylan. Hey guys, and welcome back. I don't know about you, but I'm sort of still buzzing off of that weekend. I wasn't expecting Qatar to be that dramatic, a very dramatic race. Some for good reason, some for bad reason. A dramatic after race, a dramatic morning as well. So much happening. We have a driver not completing the last Formula 1 race, being replaced, a new driver in. I'll talk about that after. Let's just start with Riddle of the Week though to settle us in for today's episode. Okay, here we go. I raced from a young age on tracks that were tight. I won many races and rose to great height. My father and mother both had the drive. By 16, I was racing, ready to thrive. With 4 titles to my name, I now stand on top. Who am I with victories that just don't stop? So, who is that? Whose mother and father both drove? Both raced. So I'll tell you the answer and the story behind the person at the end of today's episode. Now let's get into it. First of all, disclaimer, I'm sick again. So you're going to have to deal with this voice. I think it's okay today. It was very bad the rest of the weekend. And I've also got my lemsip, so you might have to deal with... Oh, yes, the cup. My friend Levine got me this cup for my birthday. It's a Daniel Rick mug. So that's what I'm going to be drinking my lemsip out of. I love myself a Daniel Rick mug. You know what he should do? Sorry, I know I need to cater to the people not actually watching the video more, but it's a Daniel Ricciardo mug that is him doing a shoey in Monza, and it's like an art. It's not like the real picture, it's like an art version of the picture of him doing the shoey, so I'm obsessed with it. You know what Daniel should release, or maybe it's too late now, but how cool would it be if he released like ceramic mugs in the shape of a shoe, like ceramic though, in the shape of his racing boot. Stop, wait, that's such a good idea. Why hasn't he done that? Has he done that? I haven't seen that. I guess it's not very practical to wash and to store. Anyway, we're happy to know a lot less chat this episode about me and more about the race because we have a lot to talk about. When I was writing my notebook with all of my notes here at the start of the weekend, I was like, am I really going to have much to say this weekend? I was wrong. Let's start with the media moments. First, my favourite media moment from a non-drama media moment from the start of the weekend was obviously Max became world champion last weekend and Red Bull surprised him with a cute little video of past and present Red Bull family drivers sort of celebrating him. So they had a little bit of Alex in. I don't know what happened to the rest of that video. Pierre, Carlos, Yuki, Liam, and Daniel. And I'm so impressed they got Daniel. Which, of course, one thing Daniel's never not going to do, is not send a congratulatory video to Max. And it was such a cute video as well. Daniel just went on and on, bringing up like memories and stuff, whereas everyone else was just like what you would expect. Congratulations, Max. Good job. Go a bit easier on us next year, whatever it was. And then Daniel was like, yeah, remember Mexico 2016, whatever you're saying. So that was very cute. And that's the first time I think Red Bull have posted Daniel or acknowledged Daniel's existence since he got fired. And I did a whole rant about that last week's episode, so maybe they heard me. And I do have a bit more to say about Daniel and that whole situation, but I'll probably leave that to more towards the end of this episode, because we do have a bit to talk about. What other media moments did we have before the start of the weekend? I don't know how many times I've said it already this season or in my podcast, but Yuki deserves the second Red Bull seat, and to me it's a joke that he hasn't been considered for it. Towards the start of the season, I could see why, because he was more reckless at the start of the season. Was it the very first race when he tried to dive bomb Daniel and nearly ran himself and Daniel off the track? That stuff would make you question if he deserves a Red Bull seat. that stuff hasn't been happening in like 20 races. And I'm bringing this up because Helmut said that Yuki is not consistent enough yet to have the Red Bull seat in an interview, which I think is insane. He's the most consistent, bar Max, the most consistent Red Bull driver. He's kept the consistency up. The consistency and his performance is in line with how the car is. Like, Daniel had some really great moments, and he had some really bad moments, and he had some normal moments. Whereas Yuki is more consistent with it, and Liam is not doing too great, in my opinion, this season. He is a rookie, getting half a season as well, important to remember. Maybe Yuki would be a little reckless in the Red Bull seat, but you know what? You'll never know if you don't let him have the chance. So Yuki needs to be in that Red Bull seat, and I would have put him in halfway through the season already. So I feel for Yuki. I don't know what much more he can do in the car that he's in right now. And the commentators are agreeing on that. Naomi agreed anyway. The lineup for the commentary, actually, quickly, this weekend on Sky is my fave lineup. Bernie, Naomi. We had Jensen, didn't we? That's my golden trio of Sky commentators. Do you think that's all of the media moments? Yeah, so the last media moment, title, Yuki deserves the Red Bull seat. And if I was in Red Bull, well, I wouldn't have fired Daniel mid-season, and Yuki would be in that seat. And we're going to discuss Daniel, Perez, and Liam soon. Oh, I just thought of something else that I forgot to write down that I need to talk about, but it's not time to talk about it yet. I must wait. Sprint quali. Right, we have a lot to talk about, so free practices are gone from this episode. Sprint quali. Clean session. Wasn't expecting to be that clean. Perez out in SQ1. Yuki out in SQ1 and Liam goes through. Impressive from Liam. Unfortunately, that didn't matter when it came to the rest of the weekend. And the thing for Perez was that it wasn't even like a huge mistake. It was just the lap wasn't clean enough. SQ3 a little more unclean. Oscar got his lap time deleted. Quite a negative sprint quali reaction actually from a lot of the drivers, particularly Lewis after the session. I mean, he was very negative, and even the commentators, which you don't see that often, the commentators being like, well, we know it's not you, we know it's the car, and him being like, no, I'm just slow. He is very down, and I was glad that he sort of managed to pick himself up a bit more for the rest of the weekend. So yeah, sprint quali saw Norris take pole. Again, an extremely clean qualifying from Lando. He started Q1 with the 1:21.356 and he finished Q3 with the 1:21.012, nearly into the 1:20s. Then we had Russell, Piastri, Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Gasly, Hulk and Lawson. Hamilton P7, obviously Russell is up there, and that's probably why Hamilton is so negative, because your biggest rival is your own teammate because you're in the same car most of the time. But he still finished one place behind Verstappen, so it's not too bad. And yeah, Colapinto struggling again, P20, a 1:23.423, obviously compared to Lando's 1:21.3. So yeah, around 2 seconds off the pace there. He's the only one who did his time in the 1:23s. We also were blessed this weekend to have F1 Academy back. F1 Academy just makes me so happy to watch. It's the only other motor series that I consistently watch. Like, I watch F2, F3, if it's on. I know what's going on in those sort of sessions. And then the other ones, like, I watch IndyCar, and you know, I enjoyed the Porsche racing, and that's really it, to be honest. But I don't exactly know what's going on a lot of times in those. I just like to watch it for the racing. But that's my resolution for next year, to get more into IndyCar and WEC and yeah, other stuff. Abby Pulling entered this weekend in F1 Academy with the chance to win the championship. It hadn't been decided yet. And she did. She won it on Saturday. She won on the first race. There was only one race this weekend. Race 2 got cancelled because they were fixing up the barriers because of a crash earlier on in the day. And yeah, that's quite disappointing that they couldn't find a time to reschedule F1 Academy, so they got their second race in. But yeah, that's quite a longer conversation, I think. So Abby Pauling, she didn't win the race, but she got enough points to win the championship. Dorian Pan, an incredible weekend in what she did. She got pole twice for both of the races because, it's one qualifying session. Your first fastest time and your second fastest time sets the grid for race 1 and 2. So Dorian had an incredible weekend as well. Vug was up there. Quali ended Pan, Vug, Pauling, Leah Block, Alkbasi and Pomoski, the wildcard, who was quite impressive this weekend as well. I didn't see a lot of content being posted about F1 Academy this weekend, which was a little disappointing. I mean from you often, unfortunately I've noticed that, and it's not really a surprise and it's not a huge bad thing, but people only sort of post about it and try to promote it when there's something in it for them, like being invited to that race weekend or whatever it is. So I do hope we see more of a push on promoting F1 Academy next year and promoting it as a motorsport series and not just like a women's motorsport series, if that makes sense. Okay, let's go back to Formula 1, the sprint. If you thought Perez's weekend started bad, it got worse. He started from the pit lane and lost position in the pit lane to Franco Colapinto. So interestingly, Perez said that was intentional. They needed clean air. They knew he wasn't going to get into the points, whatever. So they needed clear air to run their analyses and stuff like that. But Christian had no idea about that. Christian said that he doesn't know why Checo didn't go when the light went green in the pit lane. I don't know what to think about that or to believe about that. Maybe Checo's side of the garage or Checo's engineer just wasn't transparent enough with Christian about what they were doing. But yeah, that ended up obviously backfiring on Checo because everyone just watched him get overtake in the pits. The last thing he needs is that kind of hate, because that is an embarrassing thing to get overtaken in the pits. So if it was on purpose, they should have made that known more instead of like making Perez deal with the blow of all the hate. So might not have been on purpose though. Oscar versus Russell was the battle to sort of keep your eye out on during the sprints, and quite a close battle, but clean, nice battle to watch. And I'll tell you, the one thing I was not expecting to happen in that race was Lando to slow down at the very last corner, right before the finish line, not even at the last corner, to let Oscar pass. I'm glad Lando did that, obviously. It was nice to repay the favour to Oscar because when Lando was still in contention for the title, Oscar gave a win to Lando, so the teamwork there is nice. But I did think that Russell was going to get them both, so maybe it wasn't the smartest idea, but they pulled it off, so no point worrying about it now. So yeah, that was good on Lando, especially with how close they were both to Russell, with Lando slowing down that much. Good teamwork, good support from him. Another thing that came to my attention after the race, after the sprint, which I did make a TikTok about, is the relationship between Liam Lawson and Pierre Hamlin, Liam's engineer. Depending on how long you've been watching my podcast, you've probably heard me talking about the relationship between Daniel Ricciardo and Pierre Hamlin, and Pierre Gasly and Pierre Hamlin. The relationship in general, how Pierre has always, to me, seemed like one of the most supportive driver engineers. What are they called? I've always thought Pierre was one of the most supportive engineers, and his communication with his drivers has always been fantastic. There's never been blame. There's always been good communication. Obviously mistakes have been made, as every driver engineer on the grid has, with not telling them about, the car this much behind or whatever it was. But other than that, I think that the supportiveness, the lack of blame, the we'll figure this out has always been a very strong thing from Pierre. And I've said that before, that I really appreciated, while looking at Daniel's onboards like every race, I've always appreciated that communication style, and I know that Daniel did too. So it was quite surprising to me to go onto X and then to see a lot of the radio messages between Liam and Pierre over the course of a while, not just this weekend, but I just hadn't even realised that has sort of changed. And I don't blame Pierre, and I don't blame Liam, but I say Pierre Hamlin, we're not talking about Pierre Gasly, remember, must be exhausted having to get used to a new driver all the time, and once you finally like make up a regime and a way of talking that works for a specific driver, because things work differently, then having that changed again must be exhausting. Lawson just saying Perez honestly, and Liam just saying Perez honestly on the radio, and Pierre saying a lot of work ahead, we'll have a look when you're back here. Liam said, yeah, copy, just that first lap, I have no idea. And then Pierre said, yeah, but also the pace was not enough, Liam. We have to understand why that is. We can't be 3/10 slower than Bottas. He would never have said that to Daniel or Pierre, I don't think. And then when Lawson said Alonso purposely slowed down through turn 9 and 10 when he aborted his lap, it just sucks, man. All engineer replied was, that was Stroll. So that to me screams trouble in paradise between them, and I'm not blaming either of them. It's just because how invested I was in the relationship between Daniel and Pierre Hamlin, engineer, because it was just something that I hadn't really heard, a type of communication that I hadn't heard a lot of from the engineer and the driver in Formula 1. So that just took me a bit by surprise that left with Daniel. But Pierre and Liam have also had their great moments, and Pierre has said really supportive things and has been really proud of Liam at various moments as well. So if overthinking was an example, that would probably be it. But I just thought that was interesting to look into anyway. And things didn't really get better for Liam come qualifying. He didn't make it out of Q1, unfortunately, which was the point where he blamed Alonso for purposely slowing down and ruining his lap, and easy mistake to make, like he's obviously not going to be able to tell which driver it is during a qualifying session because the grid isn't laid out. It could be anyone anywhere. And obviously because of his tensions with Alonso, maybe he feels like him and Alonso are on bad terms, and that could be something that Alonso would think of doing to him. I personally don't think Alonso's really bothered to ruin someone else's race on purpose with the state that Aston Martin is sort of in right now. He is doing everything he can with his own car. I'm sure he doesn't have too much space to think about that. But yeah, either way, not a successful quali session for Liam. Even more of an unsuccessful one for Esteban Ocon. Poor Esteban. P20, Hulk P18, Lawson P17, Albon P16. So again, Ocon and Hulk, after being so strong recently, just wasn't their session, and that's okay. Q2. Oh my god, I haven't even brought up the highlight, the light of my life this weekend, the highlight of my dark days. Zhou Guanyu. You know how I feel about Zhou. He is my boy forever. And he had such a good weekend. I was so happy. And everyone was so happy for him as well. Like the commentators were like so hyped. And I just loved that. I was living for him. Magnussen and Zhou were on fire in Q2. Not literally, because that can happen in Formula 1. And Zhou just unfortunately did not make it into Q3. He was like P11, wasn't he? So close. And in the slowest car on the grid. That's my boy. Yuki unfortunately didn't make it into Q3 either. Perez was on the edge, but luckily he pulled through and he made it into Q3, which is exactly what he needed, definitely, just for his own self-confidence anyway. Max, Russell and Lando make the top 3, and then some drama between Max and George, which escalated throughout the weekend. I didn't think Max cared that much, but he does. He cares a lot, and he is furious at George. So basically, Max got a penalty for driving unnecessarily slow, and which ultimately potentially ruined Russell's outlap. I don't completely understand how it was a one-place grid penalty since Russell wasn't on a fast lap, but I know Anthony Davis explained it, and when he was explaining it, I was like, yeah, but now I can't remember what he said when he explained it, so I can't explain it to you, but I'm sure it's on YouTube if you want to figure out how that works. But I think it was quite quite harsh of a penalty, and Max was very much not happy about it. And a lot of the other drivers were confused about it. I know Alonso said that, okay, so in the future I'll just speed up to someone on my like slow lap and on their slow lap and say that they blocked me and get them to lose a place or whatever, which is true. So that was sort of the first point of inconsistency this weekend, not ever with FIA. And that set us up for a bit more this weekend. P4, Piastri, P5, Leclerc, Hamilton, P6, Sainz, Alonso, Perez, Magnussen. Alonso being up there is actually impressive, and I'm very happy that he had somewhat of a better weekend in that regard. Obviously, it feels weird to be congratulating Perez on making it to Q3 when he's, P9 and his teammate was P1. And I think it's important to remember that Perez struggling isn't more frustrating to anyone than Perez himself. He's not doing it on purpose, and he's not going to get up and leave a team that he's not being fired from. It's Formula 1, this is their dream, and as long as he can keep that seat in Red Bull, he should absolutely keep it and try to keep it. Do I think he deserves a seat in Red Bull this year? No. I don't think he's performed well enough. He deserves to be on the grid in my opinion, and I'd love to see him continue with a role in Red Bull. But if he has some way to keep that seat, good for him. You try staying in Formula 1, bro. It's his life. He can do what he wants. Race day. F1 Academy Race 2 was cancelled, which wasn't the most fun start to my day. But that didn't mean I got a lot of college work done, which was fun. That was a lie. It wasn't fun. It was just nice to get some of that work out of the way. And, I watched F2 as well. Didn't realise how dramatic F2 was. That was a very dramatic race. I've watched a few F2 races this year, but that one was quite fun to watch. And then the Formula 1 race happened. Chaos. That's all you can really describe it as. Chaos from the get-go. Stroll pushes in to Albon. It was a first lap racing incident, but I did think Stroll had more space on his side. That if it was either of their faults, it probably would be more Stroll's. But I would 100% have labelled it as a first turn incident because they're all so bunched up and an easy mistake to make. Not a very dumb mistake either, just something that happens. So that was unfortunate for Stroll and for Albon. And then while that was happening, Hulk went into Ocon, who went into Franco, and Ocon and Franco DNF'd. So another Williams DNF, because that's what they need. Did Hulk get a penalty for that? I can't remember. Oh, there's just so much going on that there's 100% a million things I'm going to leave out. Why didn't I write that down? I probably wrote it down later if he did. And before all that happened, another moment of drama for Mercedes because Lewis had a false start. I'm not going to lie, with this false start, I was looking at it and it really, to me, it genuinely looks like he didn't move until the lights went out. And I don't know if I'm just I just have bad reactions. But genuinely, I was slowing it down and I swear he doesn't move until the lights go out, but maybe he was moving ever so slightly. I wasn't really focusing on that because he had a big move, which I assumed was the false start. A lot of people confused on why Lando got a false start, had a false start before but didn't get penalised for it, but everyone is getting penalised for it now. That is because a rule has since came in following Lando's false start, because Lando, although he very clearly did false start, he didn't trigger the sensor for some reason. That's it. He just didn't trigger the sensor. So legally, in FIA rules, they couldn't mark it as a false start. Though for the eye, you could see it was false start. So that rule came in after, which affected, I think, Daniel and Perez also got done for false starts. I know a lot of people say that it's because Lando didn't pass the line, but that's not true. Lando did have a false start. It was just because the only reason he didn't get a penalty for that was because he didn't set off the sensor alarm thingy. Also admirable that I saw was Lewis admitted to the false start, which I don't think anyone has done. I know when Perez had the false start, he was like, nope, I didn't. I had a great start. And Daniel didn't even realise he had the false start either. So Lewis did realise. And he apologised for it. Obviously, Stroll had that contact on the first lap and he then retired on lap 10. Close between Tsunoda and Hulk, actually. The commentator said exactly what I was thinking. I love watching a Tsunoda Hulk battle. I feel like they have quite similar driving styles. I don't know, but I enjoy that and I hope to see more of that next year. Bottas and Lawson also had a bit of a little collision. Lawson sort of just pushed Bottas and Lawson ended up spinning and Lawson got a 10-second penalty for that. Ooh, Alonso had that amazing overtake as well, which love that for Alonso. Joe even overtook Yuki. Joe in the Saiba overtook an RB, which is a little better than the Saiba. So again, well done, Joe. So lap 25 was sort of when most of the pit stops started. Russell pitted. The even further chaos started because Alex's rear mirror, not rear mirror, side mirror, wing mirror, is that what it's called? Wing mirror? Just flew off. It just flew off. There was no collision. There was no contact. It just was gone with the wind. And the FIA, for some reason, decided that they weren't going to yellow flag it. They weren't going to safety car it. They weren't going to red flag it. They were just going to leave the wing mirror in the middle of the straight. Why? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if they've gave a reason as to why they did that yet. I haven't seen it if they have. I know that I saw that they were going to explain some of their decisions, but I haven't seen the document that explains that, if they have released that. But that's a huge mistake because it caused 2 punctures. And I don't know if it did damage to Bottas's car or not, but why wouldn't you just yellow flag it and remove the mirror? Just yellow flag sector 1. Get someone, it's beside the pits, get someone to run, grab the mirror and come back off. Or just put out a safety car, bring them into the pit for 1 lap. Boom. Would have saved all of those punctures. Now, I think the punctures entertained it, and we have seen, in my opinion, decisions where the FIA have made it to add a bit of entertainment to the race that weren't necessarily 100% ethical. Is that the word I'm looking for? So I do agree that maybe the wing mirror was left there to add a bit of drama to the race. I also saw a theory on X where people were saying that apparently the drivers were planning to strike Abu Dhabi to just not race there. I don't completely believe that. People were saying that since they were planning on striking there, potentially the FIA wanted to make sure that the Constructors wasn't decided at Qatar, so they would have to race there. I don't think the drivers would strike on the last race of the season, especially for the drivers who it could be their last race in Formula 1 ever, Bottas and Joe. Perez, potentially. I mean, Jack Doohan's first race. And the last race for a lot of people in their own team. But I do think I wouldn't mind seeing a little Formula 1 strike on like media day or something, like no one showing up on media day. Not that I'm recommending that. Don't come at me if that ever happens. But I do think that would make more sense if they were going to strike in any way. Then more drama happened between Max and Lando. Very impressive, I have to say, from Max. And Anthony Davis agrees that that's why he's... Is that his name? Anthony Davidson? I have to say, the next thing that happened, very impressive from Max, to notice that potentially Lando didn't slow during the waved yellows. It was very close. Lando had just like a millisecond before he passed the panel, had changed colour, but the flags were waving. I always, during this time of my podcast, the sun starts to ruin the lighting. But yeah, a deserved penalty, because you do have to slow under yellow flags. I thought it was very harsh of a penalty. That being said, stop and go. But my main takeaway from that was how impressive it is that Max noticed that could have been a possibility to happen, because everyone else managed to slow down. It was obviously trickier because of the position Max and Lando were at. Max was also asked about like how he knew that in a press conference, and he said, "I know that if I didn't lift, it would have been investigated right away. I asked if he lifted because he had a DRS from the back marker, and when we came out of the turn, he was a lot closer, so I just asked the team to check it." Very smart. And they checked it, and yeah, you could hear by the sound of it that he didn't lift. So then Bottas ran over the wing mirror. out of context, it 100% looks like he just purposely ran over it, but I'm guessing he was being blue flagged, so he had to go that way to let the car past. But yeah, quite unfortunate for him to run over it. You can't expect them to see where it is going, the speed that they're going down the straight especially. So Bottas running over that then led to 2 punctures. Don't know which one came first, but Hamilton's was mentioned first. Hamilton got a puncture and Carlos got a puncture. Luckily, they both managed to finish the race. I don't know if Hamilton would say that was lucky, because he did want to retire the car. So then the safety car decided to come out. Especially after that, the safety car didn't even come out straight away. They waited until like some cars had already boxed, which I found was a little unfair. Like Oscar had just boxed and then the safety car was out, and it should have been brought out to remove the wing mirror. So I don't love the stewards' decisions this race. Then there was the restart, and guess what that brought? Guess what it brought? More chaos. Perez, I don't know what happened to him. I really don't know what happened to Perez. He spun, and it really looked like it was a contact spin, but he didn't have any contact. It was said on the commentary that the car failed on him, that the engine sort of went. I couldn't exactly hear that in the onboard, but so I think it was a car problem. I don't know how that made him spin. Maybe he was trying to push too much and the acceleration wasn't there, whatever it was. I'm not a racing driver, so I don't completely know the ins and outs of how that works. So he spun, lost power, and he retired from the race. Then Visa Cash App decided to double stack their drivers to pit for sauce, because what could they lose? They didn't finish in points anyway. They probably weren't gonna. Lando then took his 10-second stop and go penalty and he ended up last, which actually showed how impressive, because when he's qualifying well, you can sometimes forget how impressive some of these cars can be. But Lando made his way up through the field quite fast, not fast enough to secure that McLaren place for the constructors, but still something to be proud enough of. But obviously very unfortunate that he got that penalty and he made that mistake, and he did make that mistake with the yellow flags. Lewis Hamilton got his penalty for the false start. He had a drive-through penalty, so he just had to drive through the pits, but he was sort of so done already that weekend that was probably just like the icing on the cake, and he asked to retire the car. They said no. Then Mercedes asked him to retire the car, and he didn't retire the car. Don't know what dialogue I was missing there, but I relate to Lewis on that. Like, no, I want to retire the car, so I'll retire it. But if you want me to retire the car, no, I'm not going to retire it. Lap 47, Joe was P8. Wanted to give him a standing ovation at this point. Alex Albon then got a penalty, 10 seconds. And Lando was back into the points at lap 54. So that was quite impressive from Lando. Max at this point was around 7 seconds ahead of Leclerc in P2, Gasly P5, Joe still at this point P8, finishing ahead of Franco. No hate to Franco, because I don't think he meant to hurt Joe's feelings, but when Franco was like, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm against, the guy at the front, Max or Joe, sort of alluding to the fact that Joe's the worst driver on the grids in Franco's opinion. Not that that's what Franco meant, but that's obviously what it came across as to Joe. That could be what Franco meant, I don't know. But I'm happy that Joe got his bit of redemption from that. And that's how the race finished. Gasly in P5, Joe in P8, Max wins, Leclerc second, and Piastri third. Driver of the day, the legend, the king, the icon, Zhou Guanyu. So deserved. Got his first points of the season. He's now 4 points, so he is tying with Liam Lawson. Bottas still is yet to get any points. I don't think it's embarrassing that this is his first points of the season and that Bottas hasn't, because they're the slowest car in the grid. 10 cars get points. They're not in that 10. I'm like leaned over half the table just to try, but you can admire my Christmas decoration skills now. George ended the race with the 5-second penalty for a safety car infringement, but that didn't lose him any positions because he had made that gap anyway. And it also confirmed that Red Bull are out of the fight for P2 in the constructors. Not a surprise, but now it's just statistically confirmed, I guess. It also solidified Perez's place in P8, so he can't fall to P9 and he can't get up to P7 either. Okay, we've moved positions again, but this, not the best lighting, but we're here. The sun is not annoying me here anyway. Personally, that was one of my favourite races this season. I'm going to have to go through all my notes from my book and just remind myself in all the races, but this is up there for one of my favourite races. Again, so much inconsistency with the stewards. It's been happening all season. It's been happening forever in Formula 1, but with all the data and everything, that makes it a lot easier to tell what a driver is doing from outside the car and all different angles and everything like that. You would think there would be less inconsistency because it's human error inconsistency now, and we just need to sort of work on that not happening anymore. By we, I mean the FIA, because I can't do anything about it. A few more things to talk about before we get into the riddle of the week. First thing, George and Max, the fallout. Max is raging with George. Tad Kravitz on his post-race show said, the rumour is that on the driver's parade holding room, so the room that they go to before the driver's parade, Max confronted George, still seething, and said something along the lines of, you and your FIA mates, I hope you're happy with what you've done. And then he said, Max didn't use those words. He said something that he couldn't really repeat on radio. And Ted said that after Max confirmed that he's not happy with George, Max said, I've never seen someone trying to screw someone over that hard. I lost all respect. So obviously this is about George sort of being very dramatic about getting Max that one place grid drop. He said that in front of all the cameras. George is such a nice guy, and then he goes and does that stuff in the steward's room, and he's never seen another driver act like that. See, on one hand, like in soccer, when someone gets tackled and they fall to the ground screaming, crying, even though it wouldn't have even caused a bruise on their leg, I feel like it is also just a bit part of the sport to try and get your competitors to do everything that you can to get someone penalised for something. I don't think it's a personality thing on George. I think that's just the way that it is, but obviously that's so frustrating for the driver that is getting penalised, and they're all a lot closer in Formula 1 than you would see in a lot of sports. A lot of them are very friendly off the track, so maybe a bit of that comes into it as well. Yeah, Max's official quote about George was, I've been in the meeting room many times in my career. I've never seen someone try to screw someone over that hard, and then I lost all the respect. Apparently Max told George that he would be taking back the position in turn 1 anyway, which he did. Max was asked if he was going to talk about it with Russell, and Max said, not right now, but you know what it is. He always acts extremely polite in front of the cameras, but if you sit together with him personally, he's a completely different person. I truly can't stand that. Then you might as well F off. I don't want anything to do with you. Oh my God, he is seething. That was a correct use of words, and I respect it. I love to see an angry Formula 1 driver. I don't think I've heard anything about Russell responding to any of that. He'll probably be asked about it next week, but yeah, I definitely am not on the side of villainising George too much, because I don't know him in person, and Max does, and there's two sides to every story, so I think it's just a bit of harmless drama right now. Other drama, this was Esteban Ocon's last race with Alpine. They announced, and Formula 1 announced, and Alpine announced this morning that Jack Doohan will be taking over, I guess, Esteban's car in Abu Dhabi. So they said that this was so Esteban would be able to compete with Haas for the end of season test. I don't know the guidelines around any of that, but if that makes sense, then that makes sense. I see this more as a hardship on Jack than Esteban, because I don't know, but I'm getting a feeling like this might be a sort of one race test for Jack, because obviously the rumours that Alpine are interested in Franco have been coming about. So it might be a sort of do well or you've lost your contract for next year sort of situation for Jack, and I hope it's not, because you can't judge a driver off of one race, especially thrown in, not mid-season, thrown in for the last race when everything is already settled and people are going to be even more feisty to get that constructor's place. So tough one on Jack. And finally, before we go into riddle, to finish off on Checo, Liam and Daniel. Daniel was in Disneyland actually, which I think is quite funny, while all this drama from yesterday was going on. Christian basically, again, he said this before, confirmed that they're sort of hoping Checo will choose to retire at the end of the season. Apparently the 2025 contract extension, and this is via Nate Saunders, Perez's 2025 contract extension that he signed earlier this year means he cannot be sacked outright, but he can be moved into a wider ambassadorial role within the company, which is apparently they want him as an ambassador. Daniel Ricciardo also had this option when he was dropped from RB, but he decided that he would rather cut all ties with Red Bull instead. Do you all remember the way the media were dragging Daniel through the mud all season long and, you know, saying he deserved to get fired and just adding to that huge hate train that was already driving on the tracks all season? Well, now the media has changed its tone with Daniel. I'll read this article to you. The more the second half of the season drags on for RB, the more it seems that dropping Daniel Ricciardo has been a huge mistake. Granted, Liam Lawson is the young, fresh face Red Bull want to look at as they ponder over what to do regarding 2025 lineup. Lawson's overall form since Ricciardo was axed in Singapore has not been a huge leap in performance. I would argue that it hasn't been a leap in performance at all, and it has been quite a back step, because Daniel's performance from, you know, mid-season on until he got fired was actually quite impressive, especially compared to his earlier performance. Perez, meanwhile, continues to go backwards, even if his retirement was not his fault in the sale. Would Ricciardo really have been much worse than Perez or Lawson in the same car had he stayed on? My answer to that is no. I think, out of anything, this proves that Daniel shouldn't have been fired mid-season. On one hand, they would never know Liam's capabilities without putting him in the car, and he is still a rookie. This is still, you know, his first season as a full-time Formula 1 driver. Full-time, like, he only stepped in mid-season, but, you know, he was only Daniel's replacement, so he has had quite a few races in Formula 1 now. So it's not completely fair to compare the two, but the media before that was, no, Liam will be in the points every weekend. Liam will make Yuki embarrassed. He'll make Daniel look like he can't drive, and Liam hasn't done that. And I think the only way Red Bull could have recovered from this huge crisis, communication mess and media mess they created by the way that they handled the Daniel situation and by firing one of Formula 1's most beloved drivers mid-season was if Perez or Liam really stepped it up and proved that it was the right decision to fire him mid-season. And that hasn't happened. And Red Bull are gonna, their lifeline to be saved from that mess is gone. And honestly, that's just on Red Bull management. If you learn one thing from Formula 1, and I'm sure Formula 1 drivers know one thing about their careers, is that it's extremely disposable and a driver can go at any minute. And that's just the way that it is. Quite a lot of talking today, especially for someone with a sore throat. So let's just move on to Riddle of the Week. So the answer of Riddle of the Week, if you didn't know, was Max Verstappen. Oh my god, my laptop is about to die. What charge are we on? 13%. We still have some time. Okay, Max was the riddle answer. So, as we know, Max is widely regarded as one of the most talented and exciting drivers in Formula 1 history. He was born on September 30th in 1997 in Belgium to racing parents, both his mum and his dad. His father, Jos Verstappen, a former Formula 1 driver, and his mother, Sophie Kumpen, who was at the race actually with his sister. He began karting at just 4 years old, which honestly I think is a little insane, putting a 4-year-old into a kart. But that's like quite usual. So Max had already made his mark from a very early age. He won all 21 races in the Belgium Championship Mini. It's a little insane. I didn't know that until I was looking up thing. He's used to his race wins, isn't he? His talent quickly became undeniable, and by 2013 he claimed the World KZ Championship. I don't know what that is actually. His move to single-seaters came shortly after. He debuted in the Florida Winter Series before joining the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. At just 16 years old, he was winning 6 consecutive races and finishing third in the championship standings. Max's F1 debut came in 2015 with Toro Rosso, making him the youngest driver to ever start a Formula 1 race at 17 years old. His breakthrough moment came at the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix, where he was promoted to RedBull Racing and won in his first race with the team. Wow. And that made him the youngest winner of a Formula 1 Grand Prix at just 18 years old. Since then, he's established himself as a dominant force in Formula 1, known for his aggressive driving style, remarkable consistency, and exceptional skills in wheel-to-wheel racing. He's racked up multiple victories and podiums, earning his first World Championship in 2021. And not even a dramatic championship at all, like quite an easily won championship. He then went on to win back-to-back titles in 2022 and 2023, further cementing his place as one of the greats in Formula 1. And his career continues to be one of rapid growth. He's made it known that he doesn't want to stay in Formula 1. Like, he's not going to be in Formula 1 in the next 10 years, and that he wants to go off and spend time with his family and just live his life as well, which I think is quite admirable. Everyone's different in that regard. Alonso and Lewis are sort of want to race as long as they can, and Max isn't really like that. But even still, this is still quite early into his career. I guess not even that early into his career, actually, since he started when he was 17. And now he's, probably 27, 26? But, you know, he could still potentially have a long way to go. So that is the riddle of the week. The answer was Max Verstappen, this year's world champion. And my voice is literally going. So I'm going to have to go, and I'll see you for the last race review of the season. Hopefully not the last podcast episode. I'll probably do one more maybe before the end of the year after Abu Dhabi. But thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next week.